Welcome to the Fit Factor podcast, where we discuss health and fitness for those who may have mistakenly thought that their best, healthiest days were behind them. That's about to change. What's going on? Welcome to the Fit Factor, episode 18. And today's going to be, if you don't know this about me already, I don't know why, but I love teaching. There's just something about teaching. I love teaching people. I love sharing information that helps people grow and get better and learn. And so today, I'm going to pull out my teacher hat a little bit, and we're going to learn some things together. But before we jump into this, I have a specific request, a very simple request, but it's very important at the same time. I just want to make a deal with you. All right, let's make a deal. If at some point today you hear something that you did not know before you flipped this podcast on, I want to ask you to do me a big favor and go give a review to my podcast. Hopefully a 5-star review, hopefully. But that's my request today, is if you hear something today that you're like, oh my gosh, I did not know that, please go give a 5-star review if you're willing and able to do that and help my podcast get a little bit more traction and help more people find me. Because the more reviews that are in, Apple says, let's make sure people are seeing more of Fit Factor. So that would be a huge favor. So today I'm going to put on my teaching hat and we're going to learn some things, but these are going to be, what we're going to talk about today is, I think, very valuable. And especially if you're pursuing any sort of fitness lifestyle or weight loss goal or anything in that sphere, I think what we're going to talk about today is really important for you to understand. So today's topic is the physiology of fat loss. The physiology of fat loss. I would be willing to bet, if I were to walk into just a room with 100 people in it, let's just say it's a church. All right. I'm not calling out my church folk, although they do like to have a lot of potlucks and fellowships. But if you walked into a church and there were 100 people in that church, I would be willing to bet, if we took a poll, no less than 80% of the people in that room at some point in their life have tried to lose weight. And it might be higher than 80. That might be conservative. It might be closer to 90 or more % of people that at some point in their adult life, they have tried to lose weight, and specifically tried to lose fat weight. So we're going to talk today about the physiology of fat loss, because if that many people in just the general population, I think that would probably be very representative of the overall population. You take a room with 100 people, you take a room with 1,000 people, I'm saying anywhere between 80 and 90% is a given that at some point in their adult life, they have tried to lose fat. And so talking about what the physiology of fat loss is probably something that could be beneficial to 80 to 90% of our population. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So when you hear the term burning fat, that's kind of the verbiage that we use here in American lingo. All right, burning fat. I want to get in the fat burning zone. So the concept of burning fat is kind of the verbiage that we use. But what does that even mean? What does it mean to burn fat? How do we burn fat? Well, or more specifically, how do we get rid of the fat, and where does it go? How does it leave our body? Now, some people, I would say the vast majority of people at some point that have tried to lose weight before, especially if they've used an exercise method to do it, you may have even said this before, something related to this concept of breaking a sweat so that you can burn fat. I mean, we're not in a classroom, but raise your hand if you've ever had that thought in your mind of exercising so you can get a good sweat going and feeling like the sweat that you're generating is where your weight loss is coming from. That's where the fat burning is taking place. So the question is this: do we sweat out fat? And the answer to that question is quite simply no. 100% no. When you lose weight from exercise, as a perfect example, I went for a run this morning with a buddy of mine. If I had weighed myself before that run, and if I had weighed myself after that run, I would be willing to bet I probably lost 2 to 3 pounds of water weight. But all I have to do to get that water weight back in me or to regain that weight is to simply drink some water and rehydrate myself. So when we lose weight through exercise, it's just water weight. It's either evaporating out of our skin. Generally, that's what's happening. It's just through sweat. It's just evaporating out of us. So we don't lose fat through sweat. All right. Do we pee it out? Does it come out through waste? All right. Maybe if you're on a ketogenic diet, you have ketones in your urine. So I guess to some very minute degree, you could say, yeah, we kind of pee it out, but that's really not it either. I mean, if you're not on a ketogenic diet and you don't have ketones in your urine and you can still burn fat, then obviously that's not the method of how our body rids itself of fat. So here's what I want you to do, especially if you're not driving. Instructions right now. If you are driving, please don't do this. Just follow along, play along with this for a little bit. But if you're not driving, on the count of 3, what I want you to do is I want you to take 3 deep inhales and slow exhales, nice and controlled. 3 inhales and 3 exhales on the count of 3. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Inhale. Last time. Congratulations. You all just got a little skinnier. Yes, that's right. You just released fat out of your body through your breath. All right. Fat leaves our body through respiration. We don't sweat it out. We don't pee it out. We literally breathe it out. Specifically, we breathe out the fat in the form of CO2. Now, bad news. If you're thinking already, I can already read some of your minds. Some of you are sitting here thinking, oh, I don't need to exercise. All I need to do is breathe a lot. So, well, you can do that, but you're probably going to hyperventilate. You're not going to be able to keep that up for very long. So that's not really a great method of fat loss. But truth be known, those breaths, when we exhale, we actually lose weight. So here's a good kind of a starting point, like point number 1. Let's talk about this. The first law of thermodynamics plays a part in maintaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight. And the first law of thermodynamics says this: energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred or converted. So you can't destroy energy and you can't create energy. All you can do is transfer it or convert it. The way the universe was designed is, I mean, I say this all the time. If you don't believe that there's a God that created the system that we live in, I just don't even know what to tell you. The beauty of how our universe was designed and how these laws function is just beyond description. If you think that was random and accidental, I just don't know what to tell you. Because the law of thermodynamics says you can't create energy, you can't destroy energy. That energy has been placed in our universe since the beginning of time, and there's a system involved. And we can only transfer and convert that energy. And we're going to talk about the process of how some of this works and paint a picture for you to be able to see the beauty of the system that was created for us to live in. But fat loss is a perfect example of the first law of thermodynamics. And here's what I mean. Talk about energy, right? Can't create it, can't destroy it. You can only transfer it or convert it. Food is filled with atomic energy. Everything we eat is made up of atoms. It's made up of energy, protons and neutrons and electrons. That energy, when put together through bonds and different chemical formats, is what changes structures. And that's what gives us, in part, that's where our macronutrients that we eat comes from. So we have carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Those are all chemical structures of atomic energy. All right. So primarily when it comes to human body and the energy that we use as humans, as animals, if you want to even go that far, dogs, cats, I mean, animals in general, we generally will use carbohydrates and or fats as energy sources. Protein, not so much. I think we've talked about this a little bit, maybe hit on it in a couple of another podcast, but protein is not an energy source. It's not used for energy. The purpose of protein is not energy. If you ever hear somebody talk about needing to eat protein so they can have energy for their workouts or whatever, they have no idea what they're talking about. Okay. Protein is a builder. It's a constructor. It's a healer. It fixes things in our bodies and grows us. But carbs and fats are the primary energy sources for the human body. Okay. So the body can use protein if needed. If you're fasting, your body can definitely break down protein. It can break down muscle and use that for fuel. But ideally, it's just so inefficient that we don't really put protein into the category of talking about energy. So carbs and fats are our primary energy sources. Okay. So what are carbohydrates and fats made of? Right down to their most simple form. Carbohydrates and fats are simply long chains of a very specific element. You might remember this from your junior high chemistry class or your high school chemistry class or science class. How many of you, just if I say there's a letter, I'm going to use this letter. And as soon as I say this letter, many of you are going to be like, I know that. Table of elements, the letter C. What's the letter C? Carbon. Hey, let me jump in here right quick and just say a word for my company, It Factor Coaching. I'm a certified health coach, certified nutrition coach, and a certified personal trainer. And I pretty much wake up every day with the goal of helping middle-aged and senior adults win in their health. Far too many people are not winning in their health. And maybe you need a coach. Maybe you need somebody to guide you and give you some expertise that you might not be able to do on your own. And that's me. That's what I'd love to do, is help you out. So just head over to my website if you'd like to get connected. It is www.itfactorcoaching.health. That's itfactorcoaching.health. I'd love to connect with you. You can find my social media links there. You can fill out a very brief little questionnaire just so we can get connected and we can get the process started. But I'd love to help you out, or someone you know and love, if they're looking to win in their health. Together, we can get this done. Carbon. Shout out to my buddy Scott Price, who pastors a church here in town called Carbon. He's on top of things. He knows the power of that little bitty element, that little bitty molecule of carbon. Carbohydrates and fats are made of chains of carbon. Some are longer, some are complex, some are simple. Carbohydrates, a very simple structure of carbons. Fats, a very complicated, sometimes thousands upon thousands of carbons can be connected, one chain at a time, one bond at a time, but it's all carbon. All right. That's where the name carbohydrates comes from. Carbon and water. Carbohydrate. A carbon molecule connected to water. Right. So carbohydrates are simple. They're short. They're easy to use. Our body prefers carbohydrates because of how easy they are to break down and to use as energy. Fats are much more complicated structures, but they're all made of carbon. And these carbon chains are held together by chemical bonds. All right. Those bonds are the key part of this process when we talk about fat loss. Because when our body needs energy, whether it's for your heart to beat, for your brain to function, for your immune system to do its job, for your muscles to grow, for your skin to heal if you cut yourself, for your hair to grow. We can go on and on and on about all the things our body needs energy to do. And what happens is when our body needs energy, it takes these long chains of carbon from carbohydrates and fats, and it literally breaks off. Just imagine this for a second. Imagine a long string of the letter C, like C, and then a dash in between each C. And they're all like dash in between letters C, just this long chain of C's. When your body needs energy, when it has a demand for energy, it breaks off one carbon molecule at a time. Click, click. It just snaps off these carbons off the ends of these chains. Okay. And it just steadily just breaks off carbon, breaks off carbon, breaks off carbon, breaks off carbon. And every single time that carbon gets snapped off the end of that chain of whether it's a fat or a carbohydrate, the breaking of that chemical bond that's connecting the two carbons together or the chain of carbons together, the breaking of that bond is the energy that we then use to execute whatever it is our body is trying to do, whether it's the heart beating again, or the immune system, or it's the exercise. You go out for a run, you go out for a bike ride, you go for a swim, you go to the gym and lift weights, whatever it is you're doing, the breaking of the bond creates the usable energy. Okay. But here's the really important part of this. That breaking of the bond creates the energy, but there's still that carbon molecule that has been snapped off. Now, this is key. When the body uses those bonds for energy and breaks off carbon, if you were to do this right now, if you were to take a really deep breath and hold your breath, whether it be 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever it is, at some point you would start to get a discomfort, feeling like you don't have enough oxygen. But the truth of the matter is that sensation that you get when you hold your breath is not the lack of oxygen that's in your body. It's the buildup of carbon dioxide. So when your body uses energy and it breaks off these carbon molecules and uses the energy from the snapping of that bond, you have these free floating carbon molecules that get left behind in the body. They're just kind of free floating. They're not connected to anything. This carbon creates an acidic environment for your body that your body doesn't like. Your body recognizes the raise in the acid levels of your body. And the first thing it wants to do is bring you back down to a healthy pH and keep your pH where it needs to be. And it has to get rid of this carbon. In order for your body to get down back below that acidic level, your body just has this system of getting rid of the carbon, that loose, free-floating carbon that's just hanging out. It immediately says, get rid of that thing. Get it out of here. So how does it do that? Well, we've already talked about carbon dioxide. What is carbon dioxide in the symbol for carbon dioxide? It's CO2. What is that? C connected to an O2. What's O2? O2 is oxygen. We breathe in oxygen. That oxygen searches out and finds carbon dioxide. And then where does it go? It goes through our bloodstream to our lungs, and we exhale it out. There's your fat loss. When you have carbon molecules getting broken off of a fatty acid, off of a fat molecule, whether that thing have hundreds or thousands of carbons connected through a long chain, breaking off that carbon, letting it free flow into your bloodstream and into your body, it gets sought out by oxygen. Oxygen grabs hold of the carbon and says, come with me. We're going to go I got to take you somewhere else. Takes you to the lungs. We breathe that carbon out in the form of CO2. The way I think of it is this: as a former school teacher, there was always some little, knucklehead kid in the class that just wouldn't listen. And at some point in a class, sometimes you would just have to call an assistant principal or somebody down to your room and say, "Hey, this kid just won't act right. Take him to the office. Get him out. I don't want him in my class." That little punk, that little knucklehead kid was carbon. And that assistant principal was O2. That was oxygen. I was calling oxygen to come pick up the carbon and get him out of here because I don't want this free floating knucklehead running around in my class. That's basically what the body does when that carbon breaks off and it's free floating. It sends out a signal that says, get that carbon out of here. I don't want that. So going back to the first law of thermodynamics, we mentioned this first law of thermodynamics in the beginning. Energy comes in to our body as chains of carbon in the form of macronutrients, carbohydrate, the carbohydrate and fat macros. So we bring in carbon. The body breaks off carbon molecules one at a time to create energy. Those bonds get broken. We use that energy. And again, first law of thermodynamics. Energy has not been destroyed. It's just been transferred back into the atmosphere in the form of carbon, which is then cycled. This is so cool. This is so cool. We talked about the creation and how all of this system was designed with perfection. We breathe out CO2. And then what uses CO2? Think back to science class. What in our environment uses CO2 in a positive way? Plants. So plants, that CO2 finds its way to plants. Plants turn it into oxygen. They release oxygen. Where does that go? That goes to us. So we've got this amazing relationship with creation, how we cycle through. We exhale the CO2 and bring in the oxygen. The plants do the exact opposite. They inhale CO2, they get rid of oxygen, and there's this beautiful circle of life that takes place. But when we talk about fat loss is literally us breathing, breaking off these chains of carbon, and one carbon at a time, breathing those out. So fat loss is simply this: exhaling carbon at a rate that's higher than you intake carbon through food. This is why the concept of calories in and calories out is important. We think in terms of calories. Really, the truth of the matter is this: take in more carbon than you exhale, and you'll gain weight. Take in less carbon than you burn and use or exhale, and you lose weight. And if you take in the equal amount of carbon as you burn, you'll maintain weight. So really, carbon is at the bottom of this whole thing. We talk about calories. It's a real thing. It's not like calories aren't real, but at the very foundational level of it, it's all about carbon. It's all about that first law of thermodynamics. It's all about that energy in, getting converted, sent back out, sent to plants, getting sent, converted, oxygen sent out, and this cycle continues. And that's part of the first law of thermodynamics. All this energy exchange is taking place. It's being transferred. It's being converted. None of it's being destroyed. None of it's being created. It's literally just being transferred and converted through a cycle that is brilliantly designed. Don't tell me it was an accident. I'm not listening. I'm not having it. All right. It's amazing how this stuff works. So the entire process, again, it's not necessarily about calories. All right. It's literally about carbon in, carbon out, energy in, energy out, atomic energy in, atomic energy out, breaking it down all the way to the carbon. Okay. So when it comes to fat loss or shrinking our bodies, if you want to shrink your waistline, if you want to lose fat on your body, if you want to get rid of the mass of fat that you have on your body, you literally shrink your body during weight loss one carbon molecule at a time. One carbon molecule at a time. And as you do that, the fat mass, those chains of carbon that are all throughout our body, they just get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And as those chains of carbon get shorter and shorter, they take up less space and our bodies shrink. So the fat mass shrinks as each chain of carbon gets shorter and shorter. It just takes up less space. All right. Think of a water balloon. If you had a bag, a Ziploc bag with 25 water balloons in it, those little bitty kind that are meant for water balloon fights, when they're laying in that Ziploc bag, they don't take up much space at all. But if you fill all of those up, the amount of volume that's going to be there, the mass that then the space they're going to take up is going to be exponentially bigger. But if you just drop a little bit, like one drop of water out of each balloon at a time, just drop, 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 drop over time, those balloons are going to get smaller and smaller and smaller and take up less and less and less space. And that's basically what's happening within our body when we talk about losing fat. Those balloons, so to speak, those cells of fat are shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, one carbon molecule at a time. So how do we apply this to exercise? Well, it's quite simple. You simply find an exercise. If you want to use exercise as a fat loss method, you simply find an exercise that increases your rate of breathing. Anything that increases your respiration is going to be a method of fat loss. Anything that increases your heart rate and increases your breathing is going to cause fat loss. But however, remember, last week, if you listened to episode 17, we talked about HIIT training versus LIST training. All right. On a minute by minute basis, like 30 minutes of each of those, HIIT is by far going to exceed the effectiveness of LIST training because HIIT is higher intensity. And what's the foundational point here? What did we just say? Find an exercise that does what? Increases your rate of breathing. So HIIT training is going to increase your rate of respiration significantly over LIST training because the heart rate is much higher. So if you were going to compare those on a 30-minute to 30-minute basis, HIIT kicks its butt all day long, every day. But as we talked about last week, you can do LIST training more frequently. You can do LIST training for longer durations. LIST training is much less likely to get you injured. There are massive benefits towards the LIST side of things. But really what it all boils down to, if you want to find something to help you lose weight through exercise, just find something that increases your rate of breathing. Second thing is this: find an exercise you enjoy. That's super important. Don't start an exercise routine doing things you don't enjoy, because the chances of you sticking with that and adhering to that process is going to be much more limited than if you'll find something you actually enjoy doing. So if you don't like the elliptical, and I say the elliptical first because I despise that thing. I don't know why. I can't stand the elliptical. I've done it enough times to be like, nope, pass. That's a hard pass. Haven't been on one in years. I just can't stand them. If you like the elliptical and that's your jam, get on the elliptical. If you like the stair climber, get on it. If you like jogging, do it. If you like walking, fast walking, do it. If you like swimming, do it. If you like riding your bike, do it. That's one of my favorites. I love cycling. It's one of my favorite things to do is cycling. But find something you like that's going to increase your rate of respiration. But remember, this is all about carbon in, carbon out. If you pick an exercise that burns a high amount of carbon through a high respiration, but you go back and you eat the same amount or more of carbon as what you just burned off, you're not going to see the results that you want. So be really conscious of, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do the work and I'm going to exhale all this fat out, because that's really what it boils down to. Just make sure you're not eating the carbon right back in and completely killing your gains. Okay. So breathing is how we get rid of fat. Respiration is how we get rid of fat. Find something you enjoy and something that increases your heart rate, which is going to increase your respiration. And we're going to breathe the fat away. Just breathe the fat away. And here's a little side note too, and something really important for you to remember. And we talked about the balloons a few minutes ago, and we'll just kind of connect back to that analogy. If you flatten out a balloon in your body, fat cell, when we burn fat, when we use the carbon molecules, when we use the energy from the bonds breaking on those fat cells, those cells don't die. The membrane of the cell stays there, just like that water balloon. If we were to empty that water balloon and not smash it up against a wall, then you would see that, okay, we emptied the water out of the water balloon, but the balloon is still intact. We could refill it again if we wanted to, and we could dump it out again, and we could refill it, and we could dump it out, and we could refill it, and we could just go through this vicious cycle of empty it out, fill it up, empty it out, fill it up. So you want to be super conscious of the fact that when you lose weight, when you lose fat weight, those membranes of fat cells, all they do is empty their contents out. But the cell membrane stays there, always ready to be refilled. So think about that the next time you get on the scale and you recognize, oh, I've lost some weight. Just know those fat cells are in there and they're saying, okay, I'm ready when you are. You want to refill me? I'm here. And that's obviously where our weight gain comes in. It's where yo-yo dieting is a part of that. I mean, you just go through the whole thing. All right. So losing weight, losing fat specifically, happens through respiration. Go find you an exercise you enjoy. Go find you an exercise that causes your breath to increase, your respiration to increase. And just as a little side note, we talked last week about the fat, quote unquote, fat burning zone. Remember this: the higher your heart rate gets, the greater the ratio of calories burned is going to come from carbohydrates. Okay. Think low intensity. That's what that low intensity steady state is. Unless you want to go do some HIIT workouts and you want to really bust tail for 30 to 45 minutes, about a couple, 2 or 3 days a week. When you find something that you enjoy, whether hopefully you find something that you'll like, low intensity is going to burn a higher ratio of fat. All right. So just keep that in mind. And I hope this is helpful. And again, I'm going to go back to what I said at the very beginning. If you felt like there was something in here today we talked about that you thought, oh my gosh, I did not know that. That's super interesting, or that's great to know, whatever it might be. Do me a favor, go do a review for my podcast. I would appreciate that. I don't have advertisements and sponsors and people sending me money to promote their businesses on my podcast. I'm just here flying solo, trying to help people out, trying to help people learn, help people get better. So that's what it's all about. But if you'd go do a review for me, that would be awesome. And until next week, you guys have a fantastic day, fantastic week, wherever you are. I appreciate you coming by, but I am out of here.